and welcome to the Standard, a fantasy football podcast. I'm your host, Jono. This is Chris, my co-host. This is the inaugural episode where we'll be talking about new faces and new places and new homes for players. Speaking of new, you'll find us on YouTube weekly. We're also going to hopefully be increasing the volume during the season, but feel free, if you like the content, give us a thumbs up and click the subscribe button. Thank you all. Let's get into the content. Let's start off with quarterbacks. Jimmy Garoppolo going from San Francisco to the Las Vegas Raiders. Give me your take. Give me your thoughts on him and where you see him in fantasy value.
Yeah, so let's talk about the last two seasons with him. He's had back-to-back injured seasons. Now, last year he only played 11 games. He came into that the first game, came back and won after Trey Lance went down. But then he got hurt later in the season. Brock Purdy took over. But in those 11 games, he was extremely efficient. Almost 2,500 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Now, he's leaving the Shanahan system, which is going to hurt him. But I actually think he's going to a better wide receiver room. You have additions like Jacoby Myers. You lose Waller, but Waller's been hurt a lot, so they add Austin Hooper, and you still have Devontae Adams there. You still have Hunter Renfrow there. You still have Josh Jacobs, who's the rushing leader from last year, coming back. It's a better offensive line. A team built around running. It's a similar play style, so they're built to run the football and play action off of that. So in terms of guys I would like in a later round of the draft, 12th, 10th to 12th round, this is a guy that he's not going to lose you weeks, but he's not going to go and win you. He's only had one 30-plus point fantasy week last year, but a lot of his games were around that 20 to 25 point range, and that's extremely serviceable. So I expect him to continue that. And one of the biggest benefits of Jimmy Garoppolo is he just doesn't turn the ball over. And he'll get you those touchdowns. He's not going to throw for a ton of yardage, but he's not turning the ball over, 2 to 3 times a game and getting you negative points. So right. He's not going to have a high ceiling, but he has a pretty low, a pretty high floor.
Yeah, and the thing with him, as you said, he's had 2 injured seasons, but again, he's not going to win you weeks. He's not a guy who's going to throw for over 4,000 yards because he has yet to do that as a pro. However, he will give you around the high 3,000s. He's going to give you over 20 touchdown passes in a full healthy year. So whether this guy is a handcuff to one of these running injury prone quarterbacks, or this guy is a zero quarterback strategy and grabbing one of these guys late and going heavy on your wide receivers and your running backs in the draft, he's going to be able to be steady Eddie for you. That's the thing. You're never going to be disappointed by him unless you're expecting him to win you a week. And in that case, this is not the guy for you.
However, I think he's actually in a really good scenario too, because, there's 2 really, really high-powered offenses in that division with them that they have to play twice a year. So you have the Chargers and you have the Kansas City Chiefs, but you also expect Denver to be better than what they were last year. So they might be point chasing, which might benefit his fantasy totals for the year. So that's another thing to consider.
Yeah, it's true. But again, we're talking about a guy who's also used to winning and not really point chasing as much either. So it's going to be a little bit different for him. It's a tough division. We know that. But somebody who was in that division and just left and is now in the complete other conference with Derrick Carr at the New Orleans Saints. I mean, this is a guy here who is a game-winning guy for you. The guy can throw for over 4,000 yards in a season. He's done it 3 out of the past 4 seasons. He go over 21 touchdowns in the last 3 years. His INTs have gone up a little bit, but let's talk about this. Andy Dalton was there last year. Andy Dalton threw for 2,800 yards in 14 games. He was QB 22. He had 18 total touchdowns. If you're telling me that Derrick Carr can't do at least that in 14 games, right, then you're kidding yourself. So there's nothing but good production and good stuff to come for Carr here. The talent's there, and tell me what your thoughts are about the weapons that he had and he now is going to be playing with.
Yeah, I mean, so look at the emerging stars that are in New Orleans, and you have Chris Olave, and someone that's not really talked about too much is Rashid Shaheed, who really came on last year
Speed.
And all he did was score touchdowns, and all he did was score big touchdowns. You still have Jawan Johnson at tight end. If Alvin Kamara is not suspended, you have a duo of Alvin Kamara and Jamaal Williams. Taysom Hill to spell him. I mean, you might be looking at, and the division is not very good. So that's a very winnable division.
Yeah.
And so they're going to be in games. Is the defense elite? No, but it's better defense than he had in Vegas. And that's going to keep him in games. So, like you kind of said, he could go out there and win games. Like, he's going to throw for 4,000 yards. Look at what Andy Dalton did last year. Look at what Jameis Winston was on pace for doing the year before. This offense can score points, and Derrick Carr is a guy that can throw the ball and score points, and his weapons are there. I mean, if Michael Thomas comes back healthy, look at the weapons that are around him. And you could argue that he has better weapons now than he did when he was in Vegas, including Devontae Adams. So,
absolutely.
I again, this is a guy that, are you going to go and waste a top 9 round draft pick on him? No. But can you get him in the 10th round? For sure. Can you get him in probably in the 12th round? Yeah, you're probably going to get him there. And if, again, it's the scenario where you're drafting running back and wide receiver heavy, or you go after one of the elite tight ends early, you don't have to go and waste a draft pick early to go and get a guy that's going to be productive for you.
I agree. And the thing about Derek Carr, he is a ceiling guy. He's going to have those weeks where he blows up. He did have some bad floors last season. However, you got to look at that Raiders team and how bad they really were, and the fact that his offense truly wasn't healthy the whole season to really help him out. And he was going out there and just trying to ball out and game as best he could. But that being said, he is a ceiling guy. He's going to give you some more boom games than Jimmy G will. And on top of that, if you're looking for that guy in that 10th, 11th, 12th round, and he's lying there between him and Jimmy G, that's your decision right there. Do you want a guy that could possibly win you a week? Sure. Or do you want a steady Eddie? And that's what you got to think about. And to me, they're more solid choices than our next guy that to me is a kind of a question mark. However, Baker Mayfield going from the Rams to the Bucks, he now may have the best receiving duo since he had Odell and Landry back in 2019 and 2020 . And even then,
he has better.
I'm saying since those guys, he hasn't been throwing to anybody that good. I mean, don't forget, he didn't have Cooper Kupp when he came over to the Rams last year to even show a sample. So
throwing to Jake Kumaro and Van Jefferson.
Yeah.
And still putting up numbers.
And he still did it. And I mean, the thing about him, in my opinion, that is so interesting is he still has thrown when he had Odell and he had Landry, he still threw for 22 to 26 touchdowns. He was around the QB 18, I think, both seasons, if not QB 18 both seasons. So he has the potential to do something. It's a matter of what we saw with Tom Brady last year. Can they give him a line to give him time to throw the ball? It doesn't matter what quarterback in the league you are, except for obviously, your Lamar Jacksons and your Kyler Murrays and these guys that can scramble around and make a play happen. When you're a pocket passing quarterback like Carr, like Jimmy G, like Baker, like Brady was, if you have the line like Tampa Bay had last year, you're not doing much. And it was a struggle for Tom, and it would be a struggle for Baker if they don't, make some decisions and focus on that in the draft.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll say and add to, I agree with everything that you said. The one thing I'll add is that, Baker is deceivingly mobile. And so he's going to be a little bit more mobile than Tom Brady. So he's going to be able to kind of get outside the pocket and extend plays a little bit. And I think, Evans and Godwin, like those are elite weapons on the outside that he's going to be able to use.
Oh,
and,
yeah. Don't forget he's got Russell Gage too coming back.
Yeah, I mean, if I told you he threw for over 2,000 yards last season, with the season that he had, like, I would be shocked. I was shocked when I looked at that number. I thought he was around, 1,500 between Carolina. Like, Carolina, like, throwing the ball stunk. But then you saw when he went to the Rams that he was effective, and that was a subpar offensive line. He had no elite weapons at the end, on the outside. They were running the ball mostly, and he was still putting up good, solid numbers. So, can we expect more? And again, this is going back to Derek Carr. This is a winnable division. This is not a very good division.
Correct.
That all these teams are rebuilding, except for Atlanta, who just went and spent a ton of money in the offseason and upgraded their entire team. But everyone else, kind of stayed stagnant, maybe made some quarterback changes. Carolina is going to probably draft in their franchise quarterback. So, who knows? This is not a guy that you probably don't even need to draft him, but keep an eye on him. And, in the first week or two, if he starts really producing some numbers, it might be a stash as a backup or at least a bye week replacement that you can pick up early in the season for nothing. So that's really my outlook on him. Like, I wouldn't go and draft Baker Mayfield. Like, I think there's better options out there, but if he starts throwing up solid numbers in the first couple of weeks of the season, he might be worth a stash.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think he's a guy that you're going to need to draft because nobody's going to be jumping off their draft playbook to grab this guy. That being said, again, the potential is there. And the thing about Derrick Carr and Baker Mayfield is these guys are players. They like to grind and play this game tooth and nail to the end of it. So whether you get one of those two guys or you have them on your roster, those are guys that are going to take chances and they're going to try and win the game for their team. And those are the guys you want. They're not going to mail it in. They're going to play till the final whistle blows.
Right.
Let's talk about question marks here because we don't have a true answer quite yet, although the whispers in the wind kind of give you an idea of what's happening. And I know you're a big Jet fan. And so let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. Do you think he's definitely going to be the Jets? Do you think something's going to happen, outside of that and he goes somewhere else?
From all the reports that have been talked about, and I'm sure everyone's up to date on this, we're not breaking news here. But it's either he's going to be retired or he's going to be a Jet, and either the Packers are going to pay him $50 million to sit on the bench, or he's going to be a Jet. Chances are, the Jets are going to get it done. Do they want to give up a first round? No, but if it comes down to it, where they're going to get him, they're going to do what is necessary because this team is ready to win right now. Look at what they did last season. And we had Zach Wilson playing quarterback for the New York Jets, and where he was having sub 200-yard throwing games. He had a sub 100-yard throwing game last year, and we were still in those games. And that's what's crazy is this defense is elite, and this is going into Rodgers. If Rodgers becomes a Jet, what do we expect from him? This is probably the best wide receiver core that he's had in a very, very long time. You're talking Jordy Nelson, Donald Driver, these type of players. You have Garrett Wilson on the outside. You have new additions in Mecole Hardman and Alan Lazard. You have Corey Davis, who's still on the roster. You have solid veteran that's going to go up and can win you the 50-50 balls. You have two tight ends that can catch the ball. You have CJ Uzomah. You have Tyler Conklin. When Breece Hall comes back, this team can run the ball down your throat. And they're going to play takeaway defense and shut down defense. So in terms of the opportunity that Rodgers will have, the ceiling is MVP. All right, that's the ceiling for him because we know he's 2 years removed from that. And even in this offense, he threw for 3,500 yards last season with rookie wide receivers all over the place and Randall Cobb running in the slot. He had no weapons around him. That team couldn't run the football. He was doing it all himself and still put up 3,500 yards. Yeah. We can expect more with the kind of weapons that he has.
Yeah, he had 26 touchdowns, which to me is a low number for Rodgers in the way they play the game. And I think that number goes up. I think he cracks the 4,000 mark. He was drafted late in a lot of drafts last year just based on all the talk was about he had no weapons. I don't think this is a case where he now has the weapons and people are going to say, is he going to show up? I think Aaron Rodgers is a gamer. This guy is football. He's going to go out, he's going to play hard, and he's going to make the passes that maybe two other people in the league could possibly make. And he's the one doing them.
And let me say this, all right? There's a couple years ago in his first MVP run where he came out and he was just scorched earth, right? He had a chip on his shoulder. He was playing with a chip on his shoulder. You don't think that he comes out this year, if he goes to the Jets and is traded away from his team, the only team he's ever been on, that he's going to play with a chip on his shoulder? You're talking scorched earth round 2 with better weapons. So,
and I like the fact that you look at the teams he's going to play. He's going to play Buffalo twice, possibly high-scoring games. Miami twice, possibly high-scoring games. This is a guy that's going to put up points for you again if you had him in previous years. I think last year, I don't want to call it a fluke because, again, he had unhealthy receivers, unhealthy running backs, and they just couldn't get the job done. I also thought the play calling wasn't that great last year for Green Bay. But again, what were they working with? So now you got yourself veteran wide receivers to help out this one rookie, or sophomore, I should say, in Garrett Wilson, who already proved himself in year one. And again, like you said, when Breece Hall comes back, they're going to run the ball well. Play action is going to be amazing. Even before Breece Hall gets back, this guy is going to carry the team on his shoulders. It's going to happen.
And let's not forget, Nathaniel Hackett is there, and he had his best offensive seasons with Nathaniel Hackett as his play caller.
Yep.
So that's another. If he goes there, like, this is a guy that, he might be a reach guy that I might look for in the first couple rounds. Not first round, or maybe not second round, but third, fourth round. That might be a guy I reach for because just of the potential alone.
Yeah.
Like, this guy can go out there, if he has these weapons, he's playing like this, he can win you weeks single-handedly.
Yeah, well, you look at a comparison. It's like in that same round range type. It's like, are you going to take him or are you going to take Justin Herbert? Like, that's the question you could ask yourself, because to me, they both have weapons. They both have the potential to throw for 4,000 to 5,000 yards. It's like, who are you going to feel more comfortable with? The reigning MVP guys, or you're going to talk about a guy who had a great sophomore season, but that offense in LA is not looking that great. And that's the question you're going to have to ask yourself. And Aaron Rodgers moving the Jets may just be the tip of the hat that you need to make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, I mean, obviously quarterbacks aren't the only thing that has been moved in terms of players to new homes and new faces. So let's move on to our running backs and what our thoughts are with this list.
Running backs.
I think we got a good list going on here. Obviously, we try to pick some big names, but I want to talk about a couple ones that aren't as big, that to me are bigger moves for not only the offense, but for that player in their career in the NFL. But let's start off with Miles Sanders.
Yeah. So last year, let's look at what he did. 1,200 yards, a little over 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns. The one knock on him is that he's not very involved in the passing game, which, in a standard league, you're not worried about a PPR and him getting reception points. But in terms of his efficiency and how he's going to be worked onto the field on third down, he's not used in that. Now, I think there's some caveats to this, and I think that we can expect the same or a little better from him. Is you look at the Carolina running backs last year that took over after the Christian McCaffrey trade, and they were highly effective. I mean, these guys were, Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard were guys that you were going out there and starting, not in a flex position, but in an RB2 position. And I think Miles Sanders is a better running back than both those guys. So you add him into this, and there's question marks. There's really good weapons there, but it's all about what's happening at quarterback. Is Andy Dalton going to be the quarterback for the entire season? Is, whoever they get in the draft at quarterback, are they going to be starting midway through, and how do they look? If they come in and they look lost, it could hurt the run game. Now, I think that actually can play into how he's used. Is they're not going to put so much onto the rookie quarterback, and they might rely on their running backs a little bit more. But again, I don't think 1,200 yards and 10 to 12 touchdowns is anything that's out of the question for him.
So I'm on the other side of the coin for this one. I think there's going to be a regression across the board. Last year was the first year he had 259 rushing attempts. That's 100 more than pretty much every other season he had. So that in itself, he had the opportunities. But again, he was on a team that was moving the ball well, scoring often, and their defense kept the offense on the field to give him more and more and more attempts. I don't see the same script with Carolina. I see Carolina stumbling a little bit from the start. I think they're going to go with whatever rookie quarterback they sign. I think they're going to throw him right out there immediately, like you saw with the Lawrences and some of these other guys. I think they're going to give these guys opportunities and stress test them. But that being said, a veteran running back is somebody good to have under your wing as a rookie quarterback. Yeah, they're going to use Miles Sanders. I just don't see him being as effective without that offensive line and without the amount of attempts. I don't see him getting up to 260 attempts, and that's what he needed to get the numbers he got. And so 11 touchdowns, 1,200, 1,300 yards. I'm thinking he's probably going to be more in the 950 range and down around like 6 or 7 touchdowns. But that's just only because I just think that offense isn't going to make a leap in the next season. I think it's going to be a work in progress.
Yeah,
but yeah, go ahead.
No, I can see that's very possible to happen. It's the one thing I'll say is with the rookie quarterback that's coming in, you actually have some good veteran weapons around him. They went out and got Thielen. They went out and got DJ Chark. They went and paid the money and got Miles Sanders. So, like, he's coming into whatever team whatever quarterback comes in there, he's coming into a team that has a lot of really good veteran guys that can help build on the success there. And with the rookie quarterback, they're not going to go and let this guy throw for 30 times, 30, 40 times a game. So someone's going to have to touch the ball. And that might be your running back. He might end up having very similar attempts. Now, He was efficient with his attempts. He averaged over 4 yards a carry last year. So he was efficient. I can see this kind of going either way. I don't think that he's a complete dud, but I'm not reaching to go and get Miles Sanders. I don't think he's a first 4-round running back.
That's what I was going to say. If he's sitting there in the 3rd and 4th round and I'm on the swing, it's going to be very difficult for me to want to pick him over some of the other guys' names that are there, especially some of the wide receivers. Yeah. Because of just it's just a little bit unknown. So you could be more confident in him last year in that 3rd, 4th round, grabbing him because of that offense.
Yeah, the way I look at it is like, would I rather have Miles Sanders in the 3rd round or go and get Josh Allen in the 3rd round? Right? Like that's your option. Is like, do you want Miles Sanders, and hopefully in the first couple rounds you're grabbing at least one running back that can be your stable guy. But if he's there in the 5th round, 6th round, it's going to be hard to pass up on him, because who else is going to be there that's going to get the guaranteed volume of work that he's going to get?
Yeah, I think tail end of the 4th round is a solid place for me to grab him. Again, like, it depends on whether you're in a keeper league and you got some running backs already to help, or you already got some big wide receivers. Then maybe grabbing a guy like him as your RB2 off the bat may be good. But to lean on a guy like this as your RB1 it would be a tough thing to do. Same thing goes with this next guy, Jamaal Williams, a guy who fantasy stud last year. You can only expect
7th best running back in standard.
Yeah, you can only expect touchdown regression just based on history itself and the running backs that have done it. However, he is moving to a team where he's going to have a very similar position as he had last year, if not pending suspension with Kamara, and the news is still yet to come out, and the jury is literally still out on all this. If he could be the lead guy there, and then all of a sudden volume is king for a guy like Jamaal Williams again.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, he had the best season of his career. He topped 1,000 yards. He had 17 touchdowns. He was number 7 in standard scoring. Now, again, this is standard that we're talking about. So he's not involved in the receiving game. You expect, if Kamara is playing, that Kamara is going to be more heavily involved in the receiving game.
Correct.
The one downside that I'm going to say that is a big, big downside for me is that he's going to lose a lot of the goal line work to Taysom Hill. And so a lot of those touchdowns that we saw last year were DeAndre Swift breaking it long, and then Jamaal Williams coming in on, within the 5 and punching it in. Taysom Hill is going to get some of those carries. And they have another guy there that's going to be able to do that. Now, if Kamara doesn't play, I still think he has a ton of value, because he's going to have the volume. He is an efficient runner. And he's he's such a likable guy. So he's a team guy. And again, we talked about it with Derrick Carr. Like, there's weapons all across the board here. So that offense is going to be pretty good. So if Kamara is there, do I like him as much? No. But if Kamara is not there and Kamara is suspended for the entire season, as we think it's going to happen, this is a guy that I guarantee, can he score 17 touchdowns again? No. Is there going to be regression there? Probably. But can he score you 12 to 15 touchdowns? Yeah, absolutely. Like, he has the nose for the end zone. He's proven it in his entire career.
Yeah, and I agree. The only thing I don't agree with is I have this gut feeling that Taysom Hill and those goal line and those plays that they designed for him are going to go away with a guy like Jamaal Williams on their staff. I think it's going to make a complete difference maker for them. They're going to go back to playing football like they did with Drew Brees. They now have got a gunslinger at quarterback. They don't have to rely on that Taysom Hill project that, honestly, it did well at times last year for him. I mean, heck, the guy had, an 80-yard touchdown run. He had a bunch of, goal line touchdowns the past couple seasons. But now you got a guy who punched in 17 goal line touchdowns pretty much. And I will say, if Kamara's not there, Jamaal Williams does have pass catching ability. He's proven it. His receptions skyrocketed. He did it in Green Bay before he came over to the Lions. So he can surely do it again here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the usage of him in the receiving game as in Detroit was based on the fact that Swift was a better receiver, and they used him in more of those third down scenarios. So I agree with you. I think he can be used there and utilized there, but he wasn't last year. He had 17 receptions on the season. And very, very little yards. I think 97 yards on the season in receiving. So, yeah, I mean, this is the big question mark is what's going to happen with Kamara, because it's going to make me like him even more. Like I still like him as a running back this season, but if Kamara's not there, I love him, not just like him.
I agree, and I mean, here's a quick question to you: if Kamara's not there, and that's a hypothetical, do you like him better than someone like Miles Sanders that we just talked about?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one too. I'm on the same page. Well, let's move on. I just think
I mean, they're in the same division, right? So they're going to be playing each other twice a year. I just think that the team is better in New Orleans, and he's going to have more opportunity to score. Yeah. So I like him better if Kamara's not there. Now, if Kamara's there, I do like Miles Sanders better.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I would take, if Kamara's there, I'm taking Jamaal Williams down at least, 7th round, most likely, because Kamara is definitely still going to be king. And that again, the only difference maker would be is if he's suspended or if there's a looming half-season suspension or something could happen. Maybe they push all these hearings to mid-season, and then again, it's a big question mark to take somebody like Kamara on your team, where he's deserved to be taken. So, but Samaje Perine, a guy moving from Cincinnati as a backup and kind of a change of pace guy to Joe Mixon, going to a place in Denver where I think he can get a grip on this offense and have a lot more involvement, I think, in my opinion, than he did in Cincinnati. And that's saying a lot because he was involved in Cincinnati and he was successful in Cincinnati. Tell me your thoughts, because I know you're high on this guy.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is another question mark where who else is going to be there. And Javonte Williams, we know, is coming off a significant injury last season. Yep. He might not be ready early season this year. I think it's pretty indicative of what they're going to do because they haven't re-signed Latavius Murray as of yet. And they spoke highly of him. They really liked him in that offense, but they haven't re-signed him, and they brought in Samaje Perine. Now, Samaje Perine didn't have a ton of work last year. But when he did, he was efficient. Averaged 4 yards a carry, was heavily involved, 38 receptions on the season. For a guy that's not very involved as a third down back, that spelled Mixon, to have 38 receptions on the season, four receiving touchdowns, and almost 300 yards receiving, in the kind of work that he had, I think that can be effective with an offense that we all expect to be better than it was last year. And Sean Payton likes to use running backs out of the backfield. Samaje Perine fits that mold. Now, if Javonte Williams is back in week 2, do I like Samaje Perine? Only as a handcuff. But if Javonte Williams might not be back until week 7, this is a guy that I would go and draft just to have in the early season, and then find the Javonte Williams owner and trade him.
Yeah. I agree. I think this is a guy that I'd take a chance on him. Obviously, you're not drafting him high in your draft, but this is a guy that you can take a chance on, even if Javonte's looking to be back and quote-unquote ready for the season. But we know how effective running backs are coming off ACL tears. And even if he's in running shape and running form, they may not want to put him out there on passing plays or pass protection or anything like that. They may want to protect their investment in Javonte, who they drafted a few years ago. Instead, I mean, you said Samaje ran for over 4 yards a carry. He's done it for the past 3 seasons every time he's touched the ball.
Every
4.8,
time.
4.5, 4.1, every single time. Targets have gone up each season. Like, Cincinnati trusted the ball in his hands. And then anytime Mixon was out, anytime Mixon went to the sideline, he was the
In the
first man
playoffs,
up.
too.
Yeah.
They trusted him in the playoffs.
Yeah, and he's found his way in the end zone. Joe Burrow trusted him out the backfield. I just think with Peyton under the helm there, like you said, likes to toss to his running backs. We know what he used to do with Kamara. I think you're going to find success. And we know Russell Wilson, he threw the ball downfield a lot, took a lot of chances. I don't see them being behind in games the way that they were last year. I see them being a little bit more conservative. And at the end of the day, he loved to dump it down. He always found Marshawn Lynch back in the day. He always found his running backs out the backfield. And it was unfortunate last year he lost them all, But that being said, I do like this guy here. He is a guy that I would still draft late round. This isn't a guy that I'd wait to see what happens week 1 and all that. I think it's a guy that, 12th, 13th round, he's sitting there. And you're looking for flex plays, you're looking for bench, players. This is a guy you could take, and especially if Javante's not ready for the season, we know Javante's going to play. We know he's a starter there. But if you want to win a couple games early on in your season and go 3-0, wouldn't you want to do that, grabbing a guy like Samaje Perine and then again maybe selling him to the Javante owner, or you are the Javante owner and you hinge your bets on the whole scenario?
I'll say that if you go and draft Jamaal Williams, you should absolutely be targeting Samaje Perine later in the draft.
Yep.
You want this handcuff because whenever Javante comes back, he's still going to be used. Sean Payton liked using 2 running backs, and this is a guy that Denver as a whole, they held teams under 20 points a game. They were the lowest scoring defense last year. So they're going to be in games, and they're going to run the ball to be in games. So do you want a piece of that backfield? I mean, if you're a Jamaal Williams owner, you got to want to have Samaje Perine.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So.
Let's talk about another running back that's moved home that I believe was a talented running back where he was. He was just, unfortunately, on not very good team. He's moving to an offense that has been proven themselves the past 2 seasons with a great coach in Dan Campbell, is David Montgomery. I think David Montgomery lands in a home where the offense is better, gives him opportunities. This may be the first time he's in a true shared backfield. I know the Bears had that Cordero Patterson experiment with him that one season, but I think at the end of the day, Swift is still there. Swift is still going to command his touches because he's explosive, but Swift can't stay healthy. And if Swift does anything like last year and he's out for 4, 5, 6 games, Montgomery is going to be a great guy to have on your team. He's going to be a guy that's going to grind out yards. 2 years ago, he found the end zone plenty of times when the Bears decided to finally trust him. And he's a hard-nosed runner, a true, classic style running back, in my opinion. Is he going to give you the Jamaal Williams numbers? I don't think so. I don't think he's punching in 17 touchdowns at the goal line. But again, you're not drafting him for 17 touchdowns on the goal line. You're drafting this guy for the potential of if there's an injury to Swift, or the guy that ends up being maybe the one that takes the second half of the games after Swift has a first half. Because again, Swift was a ghost half the games, and whether he was injured or they removed him and just didn't give him touches in the second half.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you on one point here. So I think he went to a better team. I think he went to a better offense. I think he's a better offensive line. I think he has more weapons around him. I think even though he's going to be splitting time with Swift, I think he actually is going to take the Jamaal Williams role. I don't think he's going to score 17 touchdowns, but he's going to be the primary runner. And you saw how they used Swift last year. Swift isn't staying healthy, and he hasn't stayed healthy. And I don't know if they're going to trust him to be a primary guy that's going to get 20 touches a game. Now let's talk about Montgomery. He had and we talked about this with Jamaal Williams. There's going to be regression, right? So on the flip side, Montgomery had the worst season of his career last year. He only ran for 800 yards. He only had 5 touchdowns. He had another receiving touchdown and about 300 yards receiving. So he had the worst season of his career last year. He's going to a better offense now. So can we expect progression from there? I mean, I think so. The Chicago couldn't move the ball downfield. Justin Fields was their only offensive weapon last year. So teams were just stacking the box. So it wasn't like, Montgomery had a lot of room to run there. So I think it's going to be very different in Detroit, who wants to push the ball downfield. He's going to have less stacked boxes. You're not going to be able to match when you have Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown on the outside. You're not going to be able to stack boxes with those guys. Who did Chicago have that to fear deep? To spread the defenses out. No one.
Mooney.
And I think really Detroit has a lot of that. So, I like Montgomery as kind of that later early draft pick, maybe in the late 4th, early 5th round, where he might be a steal just based on the production that he's going to have. And like I said, the one part I disagree with you is I don't think it's Swift's backfield. I think it's going to be Montgomery's backfield, and I think Swift is going to be playing the receiving role still.
To clarify, I don't think when I say I don't think he's going to take the Jamaal Williams role, I don't think he's going to take Jamaal Williams' amount of touchdowns in terms of they're going to go to him to pound that ball in the end zone. They may try it, but I don't think he's going to be as successful as Jamaal Williams was. However, I don't disagree with what you said. I still think the talent in Swift is going to show. Again, it's all hinging on, is he going to stay healthy? Period.
Right.
So, let's talk about another guy here that moves into a good situation from one offense that was poor last year for the most part to an offense that is one of the best in the NFL, and that's in Damien Harris. And we're talking about a situation that 2 years ago, this guy had, 15 touchdowns? And he had about 220 touches, I think it was. And then the exact inverse, Ramondre Stevenson that season, he had 100 touches, and last season flipped. Damien Harris had 100 touches. Yeah, he was hurt, but Ramondre Stevenson ended up having the heavy amount of touches and all the touchdowns. I think Damien goes into a situation that Singletary was the only option before, and they have a young guy in Cook who's explosive, who's going to make big plays, but you get a solid hard runner like Jamaal Williams, like David Montgomery, that this guy gets you the yardage you need and is going to get you in the end zone when you're close for Buffalo. And in my opinion, I could see Buffalo deciding to take the steam out of Josh Allen a little bit with these QB sneaks and handing it off to someone like Damien Harris in situations around the goal line when they don't have to worry about putting their QB on the line and getting him injured. That's my opinion in Harris. I like him. I think he's going to be a good guy to have on as a flex play because I just don't see him being a true RB2 yet. I don't think he's going to get the true volume, especially with Cook there.
Yeah, I mean, I know you like him a lot more than I do. I think he's coming into the offense is going to be better. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Will he have opportunities to score more on the goal line? Yeah, I think so. But the fact is that we've been saying this for 2 years where they're going to take the gas out of Josh Allen, and then they don't. Because when the scramble happens, Josh Allen runs, he has a big play, he's going to score touchdowns on that. They're looking to throw the ball downfield and spread the ball out. I just think with the emergence of Cook and Josh Allen still wanting to run the football, I think Harris is coming into a scenario where I don't know how much to me, he's a flex play. And that's at best.
I agree. I don't say at best, but I agree.
I just don't see him getting the volume that it would take to be an RB2 unless he just starts going off and scoring a lot of goal line touchdowns and taking all that work away. But Allen is so effective on the goal line. They're not like a team that scores on the goal line like that and has an effective play. We saw the Eagles last year. I mean, Jalen Hurts was hurt, and they were still running goal line sneaks with him.
Yeah.
Like Josh Allen, because it's effective. So Josh Allen's effective in that. They're not just going to pull the ball out of his hands on the 1 yard line and give it to a guy. And even so, we saw in the playoffs that Cook was more heavily involved on the goal line. So we don't even know that Harris is going to get the goal line work.
I just think Singletary lost the job there. I think Singletary was the thread of hope, and he was successful. If you look at his stats, it wasn't terrible for Singletary. He had a good rushing yard average, but to me, the more pure runner between Cook and Harris is going to be Harris. Cook is the most explosive. Like, he's a playmaker, especially out the backfield. That's how he was used in Georgia. He wasn't a pure runner at Georgia. So I still think there's going to be open opportunity for someone like Damien Harris to as a flex play, but I think he's got potential to be an RB2 on somebody's team, because I think he's going to have opportunities to get in the end zone more than people think they will. And like when it comes to it, they're going to give Josh Allen the ball to sneak, because when push comes to shove and they need to win a game, putting the ball in the best player's hands. However, why risk it in the season, or middle of games, in first quarter, in situations that you don't need to? This is where I think Damien Harris comes into play.
You know where I love Damien Harris? Is in the 2 revenge games against the Patriots. That's where I love him.
Well, let's move on to the wide receivers here, and let's keep the ship moving along.
Wide receivers.
And we've got DJ Moore. What's to say about this guy? I think at the end of the day, he goes from a bad offense last year to a situation that I can't say the offense is much better last year. He does have a quarterback that's getting another year under his belt. Justin Fields should be better. And you got to hope that they're putting the pieces together for them out in Chicago. I didn't love the move. I get why the move was made to get that first round pick for Carolina. But to me, is it that much of an upgrade going to Chicago? I would have much rather liked to see him in the hands of one of these rookie quarterbacks. But that's just my opinion. I think he's one to tread lightly on.
Well, let's talk about what Chicago needed, right? So all offseason, I'd been talking about how I thought that was going to be a landing spot for DeAndre Hopkins. I thought that was a perfect landing spot, other than the fact that Arizona didn't need a quarterback, so it didn't make sense for them to just flip flop first round picks. Yeah. For them to get, that's where I didn't see it happening. But I thought DeAndre Hopkins was going to be there. Let's take a look at two other quarterbacks in year 3. And that's Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. When they made the jump from year 2 to year 3, both of them were given elite weapons at the wide receiver position. Mm-hmm. Now, say what you will about DJ Moore, but he's an elite weapon on the outside. He's posted a 1,000-yard season every year he's been in the league, except for last year where he had almost 1,000. He had 888 yards. Yeah. Allen got Diggs, made a huge jump in his performance. Jalen Hurts got A.J. Brown, made a huge jump in his performance. Now, this is why I thought that Chicago needed that elite wide receiver talent on the outside. It made a lot of sense for them to go and get a guy like him. The trade made sense, and to get a guy like DJ Moore on top of that and still just drop down 4 picks. That's kudos for Chicago for pulling that off. Chicago's desperate for a number 1. They're desperate for it. Yeah. Then DJ Moore can go and make plays on the ball. So I think that it's going to be, I don't think he's going to have, will he be a top 10 receiver? No, but I think he could be a top 20 receiver, top 15 receiver easily. Justin Fields wants to throw the ball, and you're going to be, you have the threat of the run with Justin Fields. So the dumping it over top and the adjustments to route. I mean, DJ Moore is a great route runner, and we know that. So I think it's a good fit for him. I think it's an improvement on last season. I think it's all going to be touchdown dependent. Can he improve on having more than 5 touchdowns?
That's my knock on him is the touchdowns just aren't there, and you got to think, is Chicago really scoring that many points? That's a tough one. And a lot of the big scores last year were at the legs of Justin Fields. And I don't suspect they're going to slow him down either, because that was the only time they were successful, was he would break off these giant runs. They couldn't stop him. And but I do agree. I think an upgrade for Chicago is DJ Moore. I think the verdict is going to be out at the end of the season whether it was an upgrade for DJ Moore or not. And that's my only concern is I don't see the touchdowns going up. He's not going to a place where the opportunity is going to be there. He is really the only guy there now. And at the end of the day, 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. 1,000 yards, great for a stat line, and 5 touchdowns. And again, we're talking here in a standard league and standard scoring format. Touchdowns mean something, and 5 is not going to cut it for your wide receiver 1. Like, this guy is a wide receiver 2 to me. The problem is somebody's going to snatch him off the board because he's a wide receiver 1 for Chicago earlier than people may want to wait for him.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the risk that they'll take. Like, I don't see him. Like, I probably wouldn't draft him in the first 3 rounds. But if he's sitting there in round 4, and I've already got another receiver on my team, and I'm going, running on the other 2 picks at running back, if he's there, and what else is there at running back, and what else might be there for wide receiver? Like, he's a guy that could have potential, and I wouldn't want to reach on him, but. I mean, there's going to be volume. They're going to want to throw the ball. They're not going to want Justin Fields, like their franchise, to run 30 times a game or have 20 carries a game. So they're going to want to throw the ball. Justin Fields can throw. He had no weapons last year. He had nobody throw the ball. I mean, Chase Claypool, N'Keal Harry, Byron Pringle.
It was ugly.
It was rough.
Ugly. It was an ugly game. I never watched those games, and I could watch all of them at one time. I always focus on other ones because it was tough to watch, unless I was playing against Justin Fields in fantasy. Then it was tough to watch too. But let's move on to Odell Beckham Jr., guy who didn't play at all last year, came off a Super Bowl tear to his ACL. It goes to a place where if Lamar Jackson's there, he has value. But again, another question mark. We're talking about a guy who has not played football for an entire season. He's probably healthy off his ACL. He looked it in all his, the little shots that they show out there of all his little workouts and stuff. And we know he's talented because he's proved it for the Giants. He did it, played well for the Browns. He played well for the Rams up until that tear. Like, he's good. But the problem is he's in Baltimore. And it's been a while since they've had true wide receiver numbers come out of people out there from wide receiver 1.
Yeah, and this is another team that's desperate for a wide receiver 1. And I agree with you. It all depends on what's happening with Lamar Jackson. If Lamar Jackson comes back there, I like him. I like OBJ. Now, he's been injured the last 2 years, but he was off all last year because of the torn ACL. Yeah. So he was recovering from that torn ACL. And you can make the argument that he might be older now, right? But his knee is probably the healthiest it's been in 3 years. Mm-hmm. My concern is that he hasn't posted 1,000 yards since 2019. And even like everyone's hanging their hat on like the Super Bowl run. He was going to be MVP before he got hurt. He was doing this. He was doing that. Yeah, that Bengals defense was not very good in coverage. He had Cooper Kupp on the other side of him, so that you had to respect. There's a lot of different scenarios that played into it. Yeah. I've never been a true believer that OBJ is a true number 1. I think he works best in a system where he has another number 1 on the other side. If Tyler Huntley is the quarterback there, I don't like him.
No. Well, I don't disagree with you on your thoughts on OBJ in regards to being a number 1. I'm a Giants fan. Okay, I didn't like the draft pick when they drafted him. I didn't like an undersized guy. I wanted them to get somebody in there, a big body. I mean, I think we had lost Akeem Nicks, who had we won a Super Bowl 2 years prior with. You want a big body guy in there, and they go and get Odell Beckham, and lo and behold, the guy's an athlete. The guy's quick, he's fast, he's got great footwork, and he's got amazing hands. But he doesn't play big. That's the thing. When you don't play big, you're a wide receiver that does well over the middle, trying to find space in zone coverages. And that's where he succeeds. He gets that slant over the middle, takes it between the 2 safeties on cover 2, or he'll take it across the field and catch it and go up the sideline, which you saw in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. I think he's a very talented guy. I think he's going to be successful in Baltimore. But again, when you're drafting a guy like Odell Beckham coming off ACL tear and missing a whole season, he's now got to get in line with a quarterback who's not even sure he's going to be the quarterback yet for that team and get ready for a season. And you got to go and hope that the quarterback comes out and he's in 2019 form, MVP form, to really throw the ball successfully like he did that year. Because besides that, throwing's been poor, even with other receivers around him. They just haven't been able to do it that well. He's not accurate.
I think this move actually helped. If Lamar's there, this is all contingent on him. I think this move helps Bateman more. Because now it takes pressure off of Bateman. He's going to have more of those number 2 corner looks. I mean, Bateman's not a number 1, not as what he's proven yet in the league. And, Mark Andrews has been the number 1 receiver there for the last 3 seasons.
Yeah.
Like, that's how poor the wide receiver play has been there. And so adding OBJ, he's super talented. I'm not arguing his talent. But is he a guy that's going to go and win one-on-one matchups? We'll see how the knee heals. And this is a guy that I think I have more concerns about his health and what's happening with Lamar Jackson than anything else. So the guy, it's hard to speculate as to what's going to happen. It's the same thing with Rodgers and kind of the next guy that we're going to talk about, where we don't really know what the value is until the quarterback position is kind of established.
Solidified. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I mean, Alan Lazard, let's talk about him. If Aaron Rodgers is there, this guy is worth, every penny that, when you go to draft him later on in the draft, because he's going to be a great flex play for you, because week after week, someone like Aaron Rodgers loves his veterans and he loves his trustworthy guys. And who's going to be that guy on the Jets? It's going to be Alan Lazard. He's going to have to get a rapport with Corey
Garrett
Davis.
Wilson.
He's going to have to rapport with Garrett Wilson. He's going to have to get a rapport with the rest of the tight ends. But one guy he doesn't have to get a rapport with, that he knows his speed, he knows how to lead him, he knows where he's going to be when a route's being run, is Alan Lazard. And we know how much Aaron Rodgers loves his guys. I mean,
yeah.
I know, joking aside, the whole asking for all these players and OBJ and everything like that, we know that really wasn't true, but he's wanted guys he can trust and to throw them the ball. And he's had that all except for last year. And now he finally gets another guy who can be that way. So if Aaron Rodgers goes to the Jets, I like Alan Lazard. Like, he's not going to be your number 1 for that team. He's not going to be your wide receiver 1, but he's got that flex with potential to be a wide receiver 2 for you, because I think he's going to be playing opposite of Garrett Wilson, and I think he's going to play it well.
Yeah, and he had almost 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. He's a threat in the red zone. That is something the Jets desperately need, as a red zone target. And Rodgers is going to trust the guys that he wants to trust in the red zone. Mm-hmm. And so I think you can look at that kind of production and say, yeah, I mean, if Rodgers is there, he could be an 8 to 10 touchdown guy, just based on being targeted in the red zone. Will he have will the yardage go up? Yeah, I don't see him breaking 1,500 yards. I don't see him breaking 1,200 yards. But I can see the touchdown numbers there, and that's valuable.
I could see him being a 1,000-yard receiver, though. I could see Aaron Rodgers hosting 2,000-yard receivers in a season.
Oh, for sure.
I think it's doable.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would agree then. I agree with what you said. He's going to have instant rapport with him, and that's not something he needs to build up on. Now, I don't think a guy like Rodgers needs to have this rapport like you saw the younger guys last year, how they came along in later games. And but I think that Garrett Wilson is a more polished receiver than Christian Watson was and Romeo Doubs was. Yeah. Corey Davis is a veteran guy that's going to go out there and work. And Mecole is going to be a guy. I think Mecole is a really interesting guy too, where, they have multiple new weapons there, but Mecole is going to be used on those jet screens more so than downfield. So yeah, I mean, I really like Lazard if Rodgers is there, and a big question mark on these receivers and who's throwing them the ball. And it's like, you can love the guy and their talent, but who's throwing them the ball?
Yeah, and here's the thing: if Rodgers does go to the Jets, here's a guy who wishes he still was on the team, and that's Elijah Moore. However, that being said, I think Elijah Moore finds himself in a place where he can be just as successful with the talent around him in a quarterback that we watched him on the Texans was amazing year after year. And with all the legal troubles he's been in and missing a season and not getting the full season in last year, I think getting his full season under his belt, number one, is going to help out Elijah Moore. But Amari Cooper being the number one guy takes a lot of pressure off Elijah Moore, who I believe last year played like he was trying to be the number one guy over Garrett Wilson. And now you've got Elijah Moore coming in playing a role that's going to give him open opportunities. He's not going to get top coverage. And the guy's talented. He's good. He's quick. He's fast. He's strong over the middle with the ball. I think, to me, he got himself over to a situation that I think is better. Like, yeah, it stinks. I don't have Aaron Rodgers throwing to me or whatever, but I think he's going to be set up to be successful in Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, again, this, being a Jet fan, I got to watch this guy, and I'm really disappointed the way things worked out, and I could feel his frustration last year with the quarterback play that we had, and him wanting to get more usage, and who knows what was happening behind the scenes, but he was clearly unhappy there. He asked for a trade midseason. The trade happened, and they got a second round pick for him. So, it's the best of both worlds for both parties. One guy wanted out, the other guy got, the other team got value for him. But I agree. I think he's in a really good situation where you have Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Elijah Moore's a guy that can play on the outside and play in the slot. He plays big for a smaller guy. He's great in the air, tracking the ball, makes great sideline catches, gets open, can win the one-on-one matchups, and he's not going to need to win the one-on-one matchups against a number one corner because Amari Cooper is going to take that. And it's really interesting you brought up the Texans, because this is actually my comparison. Is like, if you think back on when Brandon Cooks was in Houston with Deshaun Watson, that's going to be my comparison for what Elijah Moore can do, and that's what I think can happen for Elijah Moore. He's that talented. He's a extremely talented guy, and if Deshaun Watson returns to what he was, and I think there was a lot of rust on the wheels last year when Deshaun Watson came back and started playing. But he started to figure it out in those last couple of games. And I think if Deshaun Watson now has an offseason to work with these guys, and he returns to even 80% of what he was when he was with Houston, Cleveland could be a scary team.
Yeah. I mean, we everybody thinks Deshaun Watson's been in the league for a while. He's a young guy still. He's got a lot of future ahead of him. And I think you now gave him another good weapon. I think Elijah Moore's, to me, when I look at Allen Lazard, Elijah Moore, those are two guys that I sit kind of in that same area. Both guys are going to be effective. I see both of them being the number twos in their respective teams, and both of them are going to have opportunities through the air from two good quarterbacks. So if you're sitting there and you're hemming and hawing between the two, or somebody snags Allen Lazard ahead of you and you wanted him, you should be happy grabbing somebody like Elijah Moore in that same round. I mean, it's a solid. Again, another receiver that is going to be a possible RB2 or flex play for you, but the upside is there for both of them. They could be 1,000-yard receivers, both of them.
And he doesn't have Zach Wilson throwing the football, so that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
Let's talk about Trent Sherfield, a guy you are very high on here. We wanted to include him because, again, everybody talks about all the big names. Let's talk about some of these other guys, these little moves where a player is now in a position to improve their play and also find a place on your fantasy roster.
Yeah, this guy I think could be the hidden gem this year at the wide receiver position. Now, I don't think he's going to crack the top 10, but this guy can be someone you can get very, very late in the draft, and no one's going to be picking up on him. But this, I think he has the potential to what we all thought Gabe Davis was going to do last year. I think that Trent Sherfield could actually do this year. You saw what he was doing last year in Miami with a very limited role. He only posted 417 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was on 30 receptions.
Yeah.
He was averaging 18 yards per catch. Yeah. He's a down the field threat. He can get open. And he was playing behind Waddle and Hill. Like, he wasn't going to see any more playing time. He's not a slot guy. But going to Buffalo, where again they like to throw the ball and they like to throw the ball deep, having him outside of Stephon Diggs, I think can be huge for him. And we'll see how training camp plays out. But this is a guy that I've been keeping my eye on, to where as soon as he signed with Buffalo, I was like, that's dangerous. That is a guy that can absolutely make plays. He's really, really effective in running his deeper routes. And we all know how Josh Allen likes to throw the ball downfield. Yeah. And, that this could be, like I said, one of the hidden gems of the draft.
When you first talked about him to me, offline here, I wasn't hesitant. I just, you have a small sample size in Miami where he kind of got lost. And then I thought the same thing, is like, he's going to go to Buffalo and get lost. And then I rethought about it. I was like, wait a minute. Isaiah McKenzie had a role in that offense. Let's just talk about the comparison of the two in terms of their physical talent. Isaiah McKenzie, 5'8", 170-something pounds, ran a 4.4 240. Trent Sherfield is 6'1", 219 pounds, and he ran a 4.4 540. We're talking about tenths of a second difference. Like it is nowhere near being far apart in terms of a comparison. If this guy has a role like Isaiah McKenzie, he is more dangerous, like you said. He's got the size, he's got the speed. He's going to be able to go up on a safety, on a ball that's thrown deep, easier than McKenzie would. And they're not going to have that little roll of him. They can throw a little bubble screen to him. They could throw a little sideline screen to him. But at the end of the day, he's more versatile than just that. And it showed anytime that Tyreek Hill was out with an ankle last year, or Waddle with his injuries, Sherfield was the next man up, and he was successful. He was open,
and he was making big play after big play.
Exactly.
And when those two went down, I mean, and again, he's going to a situation where he's not a number one. He's probably not going to be a number two, but he's going to be a guy that, when he has his limited role, could be extremely effective. And again, he could end up stealing the number two role from Gabe Davis.
Exactly what I was going to say. There's a chance he could. He's got the size. Yeah. McKenzie never had the size to do that. This guy's 6'1", 219. That's a solid receiver to go up against a solid cornerback. Yeah. I think, and if not as a slot receiver, he's a mismatch on linebackers with that speed. I mean, and on some of these nickel corners, I think he's going to have a really, really fun time in Buffalo with Josh Allen. I like it, and I thought it was a good opportunity to bring him up today, because there's a ton of receivers that made moves, but this is a good option to highlight a guy that I don't think a lot of people have their eye on, and I hope maybe somebody takes something from our conversation today. And he may not be a league winner, but he'll be a week winner for you.
He might.
So let's move on to tight ends to close out this podcast. And I'd love to talk about the first guy here, because obviously this is my team. I mean, Darren Waller going from the Raiders to Giants. Ever since we drafted Evan Ingram, and had Jeremy Shockey, as a Giants fan, I love a tight end. I love a good tight end, an athletic tight end. And Ingram just didn't work out, whether it was a rapport with Daniel Jones or the fact that he's got stones for hands. I don't know. Last year in Jacksonville proved a lot of people wrong. That being said, Darren Waller by far is a freak of an athlete. I mean, the size and the speed and the way he plays the game is so hard to replicate at that position, that to have a guy like him, when healthy, is a game changer. You gotta plan for him, and having Darren Waller there for Daniel Jones, if they don't bring in a top guy like Quentin Johnston or Jackson Smith-Njigba or somebody like that who's got some size to him, I see the Giants possibly drafting a smaller end, overall good wide receiver, whether it be Addison or somebody like that, and that makes this Darren Waller pickup the big man on campus, literally. And I think he's going to have a lot of opportunity, a lot of targets from Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said it. It's when he's healthy, right? Yeah. And in the last two seasons, he's only played 20 games. So he's missed a significant amount of time in the last two seasons with injuries. And I think that if he stays healthy, he could be a top target for Daniel Jones. Now, I can actually see this kind of going the other way too, where I think because of the threat of Waller, I think this might help other guys a little bit more, especially like the wide receiver core that they have currently. And Daniel Bellinger, I think, is a really good option as well, and I think this helps him out too.
Oh yeah.
I don't necessarily. So let's compare it to where he was being drafted last year as kind of like the number 3 tight end overall, right? Do you see him kind of still going into that number 3 overall?
No, if I'm drafting him, which not to leak any of my thoughts on what I may do in the draft, but I would like to target him. But to me, I see him as tight end 5, tight end 6.
Yeah.
I don't see him top 3. I see him creeping into the top 5 because of the potential. I don't see him falling out of the top 7. Because a couple of these guys, like another guy on this list that was in the top 5, 6 tight ends last year, falls out of my top 7. So to me, Darren Waller's a guy that I'd be willing to take a chance on the new team, the new rapport, and the opportunities he's going to get. But I'm not taking him over, Travis Kelce or
Obviously.
Mark Andrews or, I mean, it's really tough to put him back up in the top 3 without knowing if he's going to be healthy.
Yeah, it's really hard. Like I've kind of thought about it. It's really hard for me to even put him in my top 5. And I think, you said 2 guys already, Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce, but Evan Ingram, I think, can move up into the top 5. Kyle Pitts, George Kittle. I think there's other guys there, but yeah, I could see him probably at my 7th ranked overall tight end. And again, like if he stays healthy, like he's a game changer.
Yep.
But can he stay healthy for the entire season?
Yeah, and the other guys you mentioned to me are right where I'm jumbling them around. I mean, Kyle Pitts is somebody that, again, all the talent in the world, 1,000-yard receiver. I mean, but he doesn't get in the end zone. Darren Waller, he could be a 1,000-yard receiver. Is he going to get in the end zone? I think there's more opportunity for him to get in the end zone in the Giants with their offense than in Atlanta for Kyle Pitts. But then, to me, it's tough to get away from Kittle, a guy who is as tough as they come and finds the end zone every time. So I like Waller. I'm drafting him in my top 6 tight ends. And come draft time, that may change where I rank him. Somebody who did drop in my rankings and did drop in the rankings from last year is Dalton Schultz, who went from a great position where the tight ends are loved and thrown to like crazy over to the Houston Texans, who are still trying to figure out who their wide receivers are going to be and also trying to figure out who's going to be their number 1 weapon on offense. Oh, and who's going to throw the ball. So I don't know why Dalton Schultz made that move. But again, he's talented. He's good. They're going to find ways to get him the ball. I just think it's a downgrade in terms of fantasy production for Dalton Schultz.
Listen, I understand everything that you said, but I actually like the move for Schultz. The more I thought, and we talked about it kind of the other day off camera on kind of like why would he make that sign? Like he could have taken a better deal with Dallas and why do you take a 1-year deal, with and go to Houston? But because there's no weapons, I think it actually could that can lead to more usage there. We saw last year with like Jordan Atkins, like come out of nowhere and be an actual serviceable like streaming tight end option for the Texans, and they had nobody. They had nobody last year, and the offense was very poor. They're going to have a rookie. Rookies are going to like their tight ends. Schultz is a guy that can get open. He's going to be a red zone threat. How many of those red zone opportunities is he going to have? I agree with you. He falls out of my top 5. But he's one of those guys that might be around that 7 range for me too, like the 6, 7, 8 range, where I just think that because of the lack of playmakers, he might be a guy that's going to get more volume.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he falls down to the 9-10 to me, because I still feel like Goddard and some of these other guys are going to get better opportunities. I would say maybe more opportunities, but better opportunities
Yeah.
in teams that are going to move the ball and being a scoring position. And let's not forget, like, I'm a Damien Pierce owner, and I was last year. I think that guy is going to take another step forward, and he's going to be a big time, guy in the short yardage game that's going to help out a young quarterback too, just like we said about Miles Sanders. So I don't know. Mike Gesicki's another guy though that goes from being a tight end in a field of superstar receivers to a potential guy to be the number 2 pass catcher for the New England Patriots, because they just lost Jacoby Myers. And let's be honest, they really didn't have anybody true number 2 behind him. And Gesicki's an athlete. He's a good guy. He found the end zone for the Dolphins in multiple times. What do you think? Do you like him? And where would you rank him in regards to Dalton Schultz?
Well, I think that him and Mac Jones are going to do a lot of really terrible white boy gritties together. That's what I think. But I mean, Hunter Henry is still there, and we saw the last couple seasons how serviceable Hunter Henry has been as a tight end. Now, if you remember, what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith both went there, we were like, oh my God, they're going to have 2 pass catching tight ends, and this is going to kind of be Gronk and Hernandez 2.0. This I actually think can be that. When they still have Hunter Henry and they still have Gesicki, and both those guys can line up on the outside, and both those guys can block.
Yeah,
I think this offense is going to be completely different this year. I like Gesicki in this role. Is he going to get more opportunity or less opportunity than Hunter Henry? Like those, it's going to be a coin flip on those guys on who you like more. But I think that they're kind of going to go side by side as guys that can be serviceable. They're not going to be every week starters, but if you don't end up with one of the top tight ends, these are guys that you can grab and run a 2 tight end system where you're rotating between 2 guys week by week based on matchup. I think Gesicki can be a really serviceable guy there. We saw him do that with 3 other mouths to feed in Miami.
Yeah.
So you're right. Like, there's Juju Smith-Schuster, Hunter Henry, and Gesicki. Those are the top pass catchers.
Yeah, and to me, I think the more talented, physically talented tight end is Gesicki over Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry's solid. You can't knock him for anything he does. He's always there and he makes the plays. But I think in terms of physical ability, Gesicki's the better tight end. And don't forget, you got Bill O'Brien coming back there. I mean, Bill O'Brien
is going to be completely different.
Mind, a great mind, and they're going to find ways to get these guys the ball. I think you're going to see a change in terms of points scored and opportunities for the Patriots. And I mean, whispers in the wind. Who even knows? I mean, I heard Mac Jones is possibly being shopped by the Patriots, so we may get Zappy out there, who looked real good and it wasn't afraid to sling the ball all around. It wasn't making mistakes. So I don't know. I like Gesicki again. Hunter Henry being there, it puts a damper on it, but I think the guy's talented and he's going to find the end zone again. Like you said,
I think both can eat.
Yeah, you fade tight end, you can take one of those guys and be happy.
Right.
Austin Hooper moving from Tennessee over to the Raiders, taking the Darren Waller role. Well, not quite, because he's not as physically talented as Darren Waller. I believe they signed O.J. Howard too. So he goes into another shared tight end position. But Austin Hooper, to me, is that Hunter Henry, the tried, true, and trustworthy tight end of the two, especially because O.J. Howard can't stay healthy. That I think he's in a good position. I don't know if I see him in the top 12 tight ends for me, because I just don't see that being the case. However, we do know Jimmy G likes his tight ends. He likes to drop down to him. He's a sure-handed tight end too, and he's been shown that he can be trusted in the red zone and target in the red zone. He may surprise some people in terms of where he's going to be drafted and where he finishes the season.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of nailed all my points, is that, Jimmy G loves his tight ends. They're going to run a lot of play action. This offense is set up very similar. Like, they're not a spread run offense, but in terms of them wanting to run the football and run play action off that, it's very similar to what Jimmy G is good at. And you can see a lot of those tight ends be effective there. Now, O.J. Howard is there too. So it's who's going to emerge out of as the dump down shorter route, medium route receiver, tight end from them. I mean, Hunter Renfrow could take all that, but in terms of weapons, I mean, he has tons of weapons around him that defenses are going to be targeting. So he could be that dump down option for Jimmy G. And I do think that he could surprise a lot of people. He's worth a flyer. Again, if you don't go for one of these top tight ends and you lose out on guys like Goddard and Kittle and Waller, and if you wait and just don't want to go zero tight end, like this is a guy that's gonna go and he could be effective. If not, you drop him and grab and stream tight ends.
Stream tight ends. I mean, here's another. Let's move on to the last guy here. That is, to me, is another guy that, in my opinion, could surprise people as well, and that's Irv Smith Jr. Talented tight end. Again, he was in a Viking system where you had gunslinging Kirk Cousins, and you have Justin Jefferson putting up stupid numbers. You have a great wide receiver 2 in Thielen, and 3 in KJ Osborne, and then great receiving running back at the backfield. He just got lost in the mix. And then when he was being found, he ends up getting hurt here and there. He now goes to an offense that Joe Burrow has shown that he can use his tight end effectively throughout the season. You had Uzoma, you had Hayden Hurst. The only problem in that offense is they have big games and then they seem to disappear. And right. I don't think that's going to change with the appearance of Irv Smith. I think you're going to have some great games for Irv Smith, and then he's going to disappear, which, frankly, that's a tight end position for fantasy football too. So
yeah, I mean, outside the top 5 guys, like you're going to play matchup, and that's CJ Uzama and Hayden Hurst were tight end 2s in this offense with Joe Burrow. I think Irv Smith is just as talented as those guys. And, yeah, he's not going to command targets because they have so many other guys there. But on teams that defend tight ends poorly, he's going to be a really good option. And he could go out there and win you weeks. I mean, we've seen Bengal tight ends go out there and win you weeks.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So it's a guy that, if you're running a 2 tight end system where you're basically flexing – you have playing matchup based. This is a guy that you might want to go and grab along with maybe a Hunter Henry or a Gesicki, where you can kind of play matchup based ball. Having these 2 guys, he's extremely serviceable. He was last year with the Vikings, and I think he's going to continue that this year. And I think he can be a guy that might top the top 12. Is he going to be in potential? He has potential, and the offense is good enough to do it. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. I like putting him on this list. Again, he's like one of those tight ends that why are we even going to talk about Irv Smith? Like, I'm not drafting him. But again, once you go outside the top 5, maybe 6, you're really streaming tight end. I mean, last year I had David Njoku and Gerald Everett, 2 guys that were in the top. I think they finished top 12, top 11, both of them. But I played matchups. And it worked for me. It got me to a championship. But I couldn't just stick with one. I had to play the matchups because
especially in standard. Yeah, especially in standard where you're going to get, sub 10 points from that tight end position. If you just go with one, like it's the strategy should be to go and grab 2 tight ends, and one of your roster spots should be a second tight end position. And if you're not going for one of these big guys, you're going for other wide receivers and other running backs. So you're going to have those positions filled. So, sometimes it doesn't make sense to hold on to, a 4th or 5th running back on your bench and go with a second tight end, especially if you have some of those lower end top tier guys. If I have a guy like Dalton Schultz, I'm probably going to go and draft another tight end too.
Yeah.
There's a few tight ends that I'm not going to have to draft another tight end. And last year I was lucky enough to have Kels, and so I didn't need to have another tight end on my team. But if I don't have Kels or Andrews or Kittle or Pitts, I'd probably go and get a second tight end on top of those guys. Even if I got like an Evan Ingram or a Dallas Goedert, like I would want to go and get someone else. that just to be a safety net that I have someone else, because if you're getting into the game where you're just playing streaming tight end, you can take a big zero at that position.
And if you lose a week, I mean, that's where Gesicki, Hooper, and Smith come in. Well, thanks all for tuning in. That concludes our New Homes episode here. Keep an eye out for our next episode, where we'll be live streaming the NFL draft on draft night, Thursday. Feel free to follow along with us. We'll be posting the reactions afterwards.